Can't tell.
I know.
Tell the Perioskis have landed. Shithole already. We've only been here 5 minutes.
We planned this trip many months ago before all this kicked off. When we came to Berlin, this isn't something that we were expecting to see, but I'm quite pleased to see all these signs outside the Russian embassy.
Ich habe mich nach intensiver Recherche und eingehender
Is this all of them? Is it?
No, no, just a few, that's all.
Yeah.
There's a load more about the topography of town, but like a big left.
That one at the end there, the one far off. 89.
Crispy crackly.
So we're standing on we're located, we started this tour from a checkpoint. But this was a very unusual checkpoint because this wasn't like the other checkpoints located right on the Berlin Wall. Rather, this was a checkpoint which was like an island in itself within the middle, like surrounded by communist East Germany. And so basically US, Irish and UK citizens, you could, of these 14 checkpoints, but then it was a bit different. If they wanted to do crossing into East Berlin, they had more options. But the rest of you guys, you were allowed to use only 2 checkpoints. And you guys know that, like, you know, you can do, basically all of you can do technically tourism in North Korea, if you choose to. I don't know, I would have a kind of a moral issue about paying for visas to support like a horrific, brutal dictatorship. But I actually do have American and British friends of mine who've done that, yeah? And you can do it as well. You go to Beijing and, you know, there's agencies who, you don't even get a stamp in your passport. So it's like, you'll never be in trouble for that. They give you all the kind of, and it's a very controlled tour. So there was something similar as well with the DDR. But if you had your own vehicle, or if you just felt like walking, you then had to use Checkpoint Charlie as a crossing point. And if you wanted to take the public transportation, then you had to use Checkpoint Friedrichstraße as your checkpoint to cross. You guys have heard of Zoologische Garten, which was this big heart of former West Berlin. You know, the center, like the city center back then of glamorous capitalist West Berlin. And there was a giant train station there, and all the trains, S-Bahn, would leave Zoologische Garten, and they would go over the Berlin Wall, and they would go into East German terrain, yeah? But this would be the finals. They could not continue on towards Alexanderplatz, which is the hub of East Berlin. They would have to disembark here, and people would have to do their mandatory border crossing from here. So as you guys were, you know, the trains were sort of elevated then, and people were going, commuters were going down the stairs, and the stairs would be aligned with East German soldiers with guns and dogs, meaning smelling, making sure that you're not bringing anything that you're not supposed to, you know, smuggle into the country. And between this building, I'll explain the building in a second, and the train station, there was an additional sort of adjacent sort of space, which was deliberately like basically a giant like labyrinth. I'll describe it like that, because it was just it was deliberately set up to psychologically intimidate international travelers, you know, because they would force you to take a left, another left, and suddenly a right, etc. So by the time you get to passport control, you're completely disorientated. This was one of the busiest checkpoints of the 14 checkpoints. It had to lot to do because of the foreigners crossing through here, meaning at points in time, the height of the day, they could be waiting to cross this border could be up to 2 hours. You see, so you're like in this like tedious line that barely moves. And when you get to passport control, you see at the back there, you can see through the windows there, everyone's isolated in a passport control cubicle. So you'd be isolated. You can go as one family. You go in your own immigration point, and you go through to your own immigration point. The doors are locked, and then you have mirrors everywhere. And the way that the East German official immigration officer is seated, so you don't see his face, you just see, you know, his military hat with only a insignia there, and you just hear his voice, you know, like very intimidating East German voice questioning, you know, what are you doing in these? Who are you going to meet? Where are you going to stay? What are your intentions? And then you pass passport control, then the next point is where this table with suitcases are. You have to really go through customs, more East German custom officers with gloves digging through luggage, everything. And on the side you have dogs against knowing that you're not smuggling something that you're not supposed to smuggle. Yeah? Now, as far as where the Berlin Wall used to be. And so we are here. This sidewalk was assigned to the district of Wedding. So this is the district of Wedding here, and that was assigned to the French sector. So we're in West Berlin, and what's beyond there is officially Mitte, meaning that's the Soviet sector. That would have been communist East Berlin. And so first, ended up being attempted at being constructed underneath the Berlin Wall, so that people could escape from, you know, going underneath the Berlin Wall onto the safety of West Berlin. We're actually standing on one of those successful ones, Tunnel 57. 57 men, women, and children managed to escape through there. Dates from 1964. By the way, Berlin, by the way, I mentioned the cellar. And yeah. Publishing company. Right now, I don't know, but you know, the business sort of went out of business, so to say. Some people moved in there. I don't know what their exact project is. And then this whole space was handed over to the Stasis, who were formed in 1949. And this was turned out to be their sort of central ministry, the interior ministry. Every village in the DDR would have had its own sort of subdivision. Every district of every major East German town, Leipzig, Dresden, Rostock, Berlin would have had its own subdivision, yeah? And we're gonna move through the space. You notice how giant it was, you know, some of it. First of all, there is a free exhibition here. So you have the museum, you have a free exhibition that deals with the 1989 collapse of the communist system, and the archive offices. Also, they have like an exhibition, free exhibition as well, that kind of tells you the story of the sort of the bureaucratic element of the spying world here that the Stasis imposed. And
Spell my own name.
if you find the German flag blowing in the wind in the city, that is usually connected to some ministries, right? In this case, for example, you have the Ministry for Economical Cooperation and Development, and that means you also have the eagle on that flag over here. But besides that, you won't find that so much actually, right? It's hardly anyone has the German flag in his garden. You won't find a lot of people waving the German flag, and I think this is also connected to the history that we have actually. Because I told you this introduction of the German Empire being so nationalistic and militant that directly leads to World War I. The Nazis also pushed the idea of militarism, patriotism so much more. We see where this leads to in the end. So you can maybe understand that a lot of, I dare to say, Berliners. Be a bit careful, of course, with the term fascism. Right? Same also goes for the term Nazi. Fascismo, which originates from Italy, kind of is giving you an image of unity, strength in numbers. Imagine one little branch, which is easy to crack in itself, but a bundle of them all together built an unbreakable force. That's kind of the idea behind it. So it's really all about the numbers in masses, not the individual. Imagine one singular person standing on a square over here. Kind of gets swallowed by the background. So this architecture is not there to be pretty or beautiful, to overwhelm you, to make you feel small, and looks like a fortress or prison almost. So if you take a closer look around, you will see there's not too much of interest apparently. Right? I talked about the architecture itself. Besides that, an old ugly parking lot. There's a tourist group over there though. It must be something of interest. And the answer is pretty easy. This is where Adolf Hitler died. So you are standing now on the remains of the bunker. Right? The bunker it is. And now to answer your first question, no, you can't visit it. It's completely filled up with concrete. Actually, again, denazification has so many different phases. But also to make you aware, where this block is standing now, which I was pointing out, this is kind of where I have to imagine Adolf Hitler's headquarters to be located back then. The new Reichskanzlei basically standing over there, directly connected to that, you would have the bunker. Right, which was then of course a bit more secure. He's trying to organize the war efforts from there in 1945, but I would say it takes till the 30th of April for him to realize that this war cannot be won anymore. This is when he's writing down his testament, which we still have, and it says specifically his body is not supposed to fall in the hands of his enemies. They would likely use this corpse as a war trophy. Same thing happened with Mussolini before. So Adolf Hitler basically is giving post-mortem the order that his corpse is to be taken out of the bunker, put somewhere in a crater, somewhere over there I think it would be, gasoline to be used to burn the whole thing, that you can't identify it or find it at all. Right? At least that seems to be one attitude. Now here, hopefully we all agree on that topic. I'm pretty sure Adolf Hitler is dead. He was born 1889, so I hope we can all agree on that as well. Was not the best health when he finally died as well. But you know, there are still all these conspiracies around there. Right? If he made it to Argentina, to the dark side of the moon or whatever. Same goes for the history of the corpse. Apparently, and this is now all based on Russian troop reports, so please be careful of that, but this is only one way to tell the story. The Red Army is coming from that direction over there, back then. And they of course are aware this is the former headquarters of Adolf Hitler's. And they're looking around for some pieces for him maybe, and they find two burnt corpses lying next to each other. And they assume it is Adolf Hitler and Eva Hitler, formerly known as Eva Braun, obviously. But they can't really prove it yet. So what is the option now? DNA is not really a thing yet, but you can still use, of course, the teeth to identify people. Right? So apparently these Russian troops are able to find the office of a dentist of Adolf Hitler with a negative copy of them, right? Using that to compare to the corpse. Apparently a perfect match. With that, Adolf Hitler is identified. Some of you already maybe did. Again, don't spoil it. If this is the first time here for you, this is really a must-do, I would say. So keep your eyes and ears open while you walk through that. Maybe also separate from each other if you can. And we're not gonna meet here again, but on the other side. Right? So basically, you can see the traffic lights all the way in the back. This can be used for orientation. It will show up. I will stand there at some point. So far, it worked every time. Right? And when we meet again, we will collect all the observations and work with that. Right? That's basically the plan. Right?
Yeah, I'm just what I'm looking at.
title. Occasionally referred to as Holocaust Memorial. You can call it what you want in the end. It is a memorial for more than 6 million murdered people, which is a good third of the global Jewish population back then. So try to get your head around that. That is kind of impossible. You cannot just have a statue or a sign over here. In the end, you have to come up with something a bit more abstract. And the designer or architect behind it is called Peter Eisenman, a New Yorker with Jewish roots. And he's not giving us any way to read that whatsoever, because he's smart, right? As soon as the artist tells you, I wanted to create this and that, everybody will say, but he said he wanted to create this and that. No, without giving you any real options, that means you have to come up with something by yourself, right? This is the tricky thing about abstract art. It's not about the question, what is the artist telling us here, but what can you get out of it? Kind of a tricky thing today. This is indeed a Red Army War Memorial, opened and built up in 1945, so in time when the wounds are still very fresh. A lot of the elements over here are taken directly from Adolf Hitler's headquarters, from the new Reich Chancellery, to be reused for this memorial over here. And as you can see, someone was really making sure to stand where actually you need to be. This is marking you the point that you walk up again, right? So as we call it, the frog's perspective, looking up to the soldier up there. To be fair, his gun is on his shoulders, so the fighting is over, but he's holding the hand down almost like an occupation force, which is exactly the case, right? So this opened up right after World War II, 1945, is also showing you the artillery and the tanks over there that were apparently really used in the battle over here. And you will also notice that it's very specific. It's almost a tunnel vision on history. Not sure how good your Russian is, but it basically says, to the ones who gave their lives fighting against German fascism and militarism. And you maybe notice 1941 to 1945, right? Not 1939. So the fate of Poland, for example, is completely ignored over here. This is just a Red Army War Memorial, and very dedicated to the soldiers that left their lives, or lost their lives, fighting against Germany, right? When it comes to the Reichstag building over there, the Red Army apparently lost almost as many troops as the Americans on D-Day just to conquer that building over there. So when it comes to numbers, the Red Army had to bleed the most, and therefore I guess you also take the right to build up your own memorial, even though that is former British sector, actually, right? And you see now, today, this really has a special taste to it. When you get to the German perspective over here, it is also not pretty well received. My grandma, for example, if she would still be alive, she could tell you stories about the Russian occupation back then. We just don't know for sure, but we assume that over 2 million women were raped and murdered in the course of that occupation. There's so much confiscation happening. One of the problems that the GDR has from the beginning on is the reparation that they have to pay to the Soviet Union. Because, excuse my language, but the Soviet Union is completely fucked up after World War II. So the Russian soldiers apparently take what they can, confiscate here in Berlin, radios, pianos, but also houses, railway stations. Everything is dismantled and sent over to the Soviet Union as reparation money. And while this is then the fate of East Germany, you will find historians assuming that the damage done to their economy that way is bigger than the destructions of World War II. I'm not sure if that's true, but to put it in relation to each other, West Germany is much more lucky to have the Americans on their side, and with that also to profit from the Marshall Plan. Right? So 1.4 billion US dollars are pumped in that economy to rebuild it very fast, to make it uprise one more time. So it seems like West Germany is ahead of things also because of the support that they have, and East Germany not so much. So yeah, all that can play into this memorial over here, but I would really ask you to see that as an expression of the time 1945 and not of today, obviously. You can imagine when these demonstrations happening, Christopher Street Day, all that, especially this last House of Parliament back then. The man who is in charge of that is this guy over here, Paul von Hindenburg, who is the Reich's president at this time. Consider this guy to be someone like the overlooking head of the constitution. If he feels like the parliament, the government is not working properly, he can just say new elections and everything starts from the beginning. And when that is happening every half year, I can imagine you get the feeling like democracy does not get the job done properly. Again, something new, something progressive for a lot of people. And the result is the Nazis are setting themselves almost as anti-parliamentarians, as a party rather doing something instead of only talking about it. Not as intellectuals up there, but rather people out of the middle of society. I mean, you heard these arguments before and you will hear them again and again. It's common procedure, but it kind of works. If you see a closer look here, the voting polls of the Nazis are getting bigger and bigger. They are very successful, especially in the 1930s. Never an absolute majority though, but damn close actually. So in January 1933, Adolf Hitler becomes the Reich's Chancellor. Pretty similar to the Chancellor today. Any one of you able to name the name of our Chancellor, by the way? Right now?
Schultz.
Olaf Scholz, yeah, very good. I guess you still have to build your reputation as you are Chancellor, because if I say Angela Merkel, it rings a bell, hopefully. Scholz still has to build on that. So you grow into it. And same goes for Adolf Hitler. The first thing he's doing now is basically to convince Paul von Hindenburg that it's time to dissolve the House of Parliament. And you may ask yourself now why. Right? He has a lot of seats in Parliament. He has the executive and the legislative power on his side, it seems like. But he can even improve that. Because he's aware of the constitution of the Weimar Republic. He knows when new elections are happening, the separating of the powers, the separation, is basically abandoned. That means the government can legislate emergency laws as they desire. This is exactly what happens, right? So in the next month, Adolf Hitler is using this new power that he has to send a lot of his political opposition to the concentration camps. Keep in mind, communists, social democrats are the first victims of these camps, actually. Extremely handy on the 27th of February 1933, when this house here behind me is completely on fire and burning out. Right, we refer to that as the Reichstagsburning today. And historians are till this day not 100% sure who's to blame for that. The Nazis did it, sorry. Sorry, the Nazis did it, I'm pretty sure about that. In every case, it was not an accident. And whatever the story really is, here's Adolf Hitler's version. He is propaganding the idea that his SR troops found a man at the scene of the crime called Marinus von der Lippe, a formerly known man as a communist. Very convenient now for Adolf Hitler, because now he's blaming the communists for burning down the House of Parliament, right? That leads to more and more to be arrested to protect German society. It also means democracy is slowly melting down. Freedom of speech, freedom of press, freedom of gathering, postal secrets, all abandoned part by part by part. And then when in March 1933 a new parliament is set together, the communists lost a lot of their seats to the Nazis. And even the ones they can occupy are just scratched out by Adolf Hitler, and all of a sudden the Nazis have a majority basically in this parliament. And that brings us to the last element, the so-called Ermächtigungsgesetz. Enabling Act is to be debated in this new parliament. Now, long story short, if that would be put on the way, that would permanently basically mean that Adolf Hitler would be executive and legislative order at the same time. And there would basically be no parliament in its way. And now you ask yourself again, maybe, which parliament would agree to that? It's like almost cutting off your own heads. But the people are intimidated, for example. Right? When this election happens, the SR is in the room. Some of the parties are even on the line with the Nazis. The communists are out of the equation. And in the end, it's only the social democrats who are bold enough to vote against that. But they are not powerful enough. And ultimately, that means by democratic election, democracy is put to the grave, actually, in 1933. This is long before the Holocaust is initiated. This is long before World War II happens. This is long before the destruction happens over here. Really, 1933 is, you could say, is the year when shit hits the fan. At least 1 year later, when Paul von Hindenburg is dying, and Adolf Hitler is also stepping in for Reichspräsident, he's combining these two offices to become Reichsführer, and with that he basically built up a dictatorship. And he has all the control in his hand that he needs. Almost on a legal democratic basis, you can see, right? So democracy is really used to get rid of it in the end. And that is the big lesson to be learned from that, I would say. Because after that, that house is not used, basically not used as a parliament till 1990. This is all former West Berlin, and since the political headquarters of West Germany used to be the city of Bonn, not Berlin, actually takes till the unification to become our House of Parliament for the term. For real, actually, till 1999. And now you can see there's the glass on top still, which is not only giving you a good overview over the government's district, but you will also find that the floor up there is for a big part made out of glass. So you, as the voting people, literally stand on the heads of the politicians, looking down to check if everything goes smoothly, if you will. Almost as a controlling factor. As I said, transparency, inclusion, it's all important lesson over here. Directly learned from this rise, which is not a revolution, step by step by step. And as you can see, it says to the German people on that house since 1914, by the way. So this is our house, and we should have all right to participate with that. Yeah, and with all that input, you maybe understand now that it really sent its shivers